the invisible, and I am living on traditional land of the Massachusetts people. I'm going to share a quote by Bell Hooks, rest in peace. She says, "One of our most vital ways that we sustain ourselves is by building communities of resistance, places where we know we are not alone." And so in these times, which can be a little bit isolating and challenging, we think it's really important to come together and build resistance so that we don't feel so alone, and also so that we can win some changes that we all need. So real quickly on logistics, I'm just going to go over a little bit of tech for tonight's webinar. SURJ has a commitment to disability justice and access, and that is a part of all of our work. Because of that, tonight we have Jenna and Jennifer, and they're here as part of our team, and they're offering American Sign Language interpretation. They're going to be spotlighted, which means that their video is always going to be featured on the Zoom screen, and you'll see them in the presenter's video. And we are also lucky to be joined by Emily, who is our captioner tonight. If you're joining tonight on Zoom, you can view the live captions or a live transcript. If you see the little CC icon in the bottom bar of the Zoom window, just click on that and you can get the captions. And if you're watching on Facebook, we're going to put a link in the comments section, and you can go there to stream text, all of the text. So just click on that link there. If you have any tech issues, please use the chat to send us a message, and the panelists and the tech folks will try and address that. We do have the chat available, but we also want to keep side conversations to a minimum. We're here to listen and to focus on the speakers, and sometimes the chat can get a little distracting. It can also sometimes make it hard for screen readers to read it, so we do try to not use it too much. If you have questions, we do encourage questions, and there's a little Q&A feature that's different from the chat. So feel free to throw questions in there and we'll answer them to the best of our ability. So welcome, we're so glad you're here. A lot of folks we know are here for the first time, and we think that you are right on time joining us. We're so thrilled to have more and more people joining the fight for racial justice, and we know that together we can win. So about a year ago, we were actually here talking about what had happened with the insurrection on January 6th last year, and we were discussing what white people can do. Since then, there's been more and more speculation about potentially an oncoming civil war, a rise of fascism. You know, there's a lot of fear, and there's justified reasons to be afraid. And I also want to keep us grounded in the fact that none of this is certain, except we know that if we don't fight back, we can't win. This is really contested ground, and if we organize, we can win. So the folks who turned out on January 6th were organized into their beliefs by white nationalists and others on the right who wanted to take advantage of fear and inequality by blaming people of color and distracting from the real enemy. The right knows that they can build power by bombarding people with racism. They get that when they go to church, when they turn on their TV, check social media. And so if we want to prevent another coup or this rising authoritarianism, we need to be out organizing the right and out in white communities talking to white people about it. There are millions of white people who could go either way, people who are conflicted or vulnerable to the messages of the right. And we have to fight for them as hard as the right is fighting for them. There are also a lot of white people in this country who have everything to gain by fighting for racial justice and fighting alongside communities of color. So poor and working class people, disabled people, queer and trans people. Many of them know who the real enemies are, right? So they know that the bosses, the crooked politicians, and the billionaires are the real enemies. And even though they agree with us, they haven't yet been organized. And so that's where SURJ and our ally organizations come into play. We know from our experience that we can't wait for people to come and join us always. We actually have to go out and meet them where they are. So talk to them where they're living, where they're working, and show them ways that they can get involved and fight alongside us to demand justice. So some of the folks that we're hearing from tonight are doing just that. We have a really amazing panel of people who are using electoral strategies to have conversations, making culture, helping shift how people think about these issues, and getting out there and talking with poor and working class people, disabled people, and queer people about our mutual interests in fighting. So we're going to hear from them tonight about how they're successfully peeling white people off from the right. So we have folks from SURJ Ohio, from Punch Up, and from Redneck for Black Lives of SURJ. Just to give people a heads up, we are going to talk a little bit about violence and sexual assault. We'll give you another heads up before we do that, but we wanted to name that at the beginning. And then also we have a Countering White Supremacism working group through the SURJ National Chapter Network. So it's a group of chapter leaders who have built trust with each other, they support each other's work, and they share information and support people in the chapter network who reach out for help. So if folks are dealing with local white supremacist groups and they want to get support on that, they should reach out to the chapter network. And we can help provide strategy, break some of the isolation, and provide both emotional and material support if you're dealing with that locally. So I'm now going to pass to one of our founders, Carla, who's going to talk a little about how and why we organize white people at SURJ.
Hey, I'm excited to be in this space with all of you. As Julia started us out, these are really urgent times to be undermining the rapid progress of the far right and building the world we need. And you all are a key part of doing that. I'm Carla, an older white woman with shoulder-length brown hair, a deep groove in my brow from frowning at bad things, wearing a black turtleneck sweater and in front of a white and yellow background in my kitchen. I am on Cherokee, Shawnee, and Osage land, Louisville, Kentucky, and I use she, they pronouns. I'm going to speak briefly on SURJ herstory, why we organize white people, and our approach to that work. So over 12 years ago, the country, as you all know, elected the first Black president. And a majority of liberals, especially white liberals, hailed a so-called post-racial America. But instead, a virulent racist backlash was unleashed. In the midst of that, SURJ was born by a cross-class group of white Southerners, including Pam McMichael, at that time the director of the Highlander Center in Tennessee, me and others across the country who knew we had to act. SURJ was our specific answer to the question from Black and other white folks doing anti-racist work to the question, what are white people doing? This call was far from new. The inspiration for SURJ goes back over 50 years to the Southern Civil Rights Movement when SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, told white people to go organize our own. SNCC leader Stokely Carmichael said, one of the most disturbing things about almost all white supporters of the movement has been that they are afraid to go into their own communities, which is where the racism exists, and work to get rid of it. Malcolm X said, where the really sincere white people have got to do their proving of themselves is not among the Black victims, but out on the battle lines of where America's racism really is, and that's in their home communities. As the far right grows in leaps and bounds, literally organizing white people out from under us, this call for us to organize our own becomes more and more urgent. So our part is the white people, and we have a huge task before us. We have to win over enough white folks, we don't need all of them, but enough to join together with Black, people of color, and Indigenous people to block the far right and build the power we need to win change. Change that gets people out from under economic exploitation, police and prison repression, environmental destruction, endless war, and more. Well, and unless we do this, the racist, misogynist, ableist, undemocratic far right forces are going to take full control. However, SURJ has one part of the solution to this, and a big part of that is you. First of all, at SURJ, we believe in organizing. That can happen through a power building issue campaign, through bringing people together in your community, your town, your rural county, your faith space, your workplace, your school. It means we cannot, as Julia said, wait to see who comes to us. It means we go to where people are, literally knocking on doors, literally calling folks on the phone, building a bigger and bigger base of people to wage the battle, grow new leaders, and use each fight with those at the top to build the people power for a new world. We are also focusing on majority white communities, most ravaged by an economic system that benefits the few at the expense of the many. those most harmed when choosing whiteness over siding with Black and people of color, those most harmed by a policing system and an incarceration system where in my hometown, 3 out of the 5 people who just died in our jail were poor and white. We are talking about those white folks who have been called a basket of deplorables and pushed aside by too many progressives and others who are supposed to be on our side. Our focus areas include rural people, the South, people with disabilities, folks using drugs, the underhoused or unhoused, people who are sick or dying from dirty air or healthcare fails. And we see a role for everyone in this work, and we need all of us if we're going to grow what's needed to counter the right. So no matter who you are, where you come from, or what identity you bring, you get to be part of the collective we of SURJ, which brings us to another core piece of how we do the work, and that is mutual or shared interest. We invite everyone who is part of SURJ to figure out why you are here, or if you know why you're here, to bring it. At its core, this is asking ourselves, what kind of world do we need and want, and what is the cost to us, to our ability to live, to take care of our families, to thrive, the cost to our humanity if we don't engage in this fight. SURJ works in strategic relationship with Black and people of color-led formations, whose vision for a country and a world where needs are met and we are safe and free is the vision that will liberate us all. What is our shared interest in this vision set by liberatory, feminist, radical Black and people of color that leads to everyone having a roof, enough to eat, not to be sent to kill people in lands far away or beaten by police, the ability to care for a sick loved one, air we can breathe, time to dance. I think of mutual or shared interest as that deep root that can anchor us when it gets hard, and it does get hard. A root that connects us to each other in a growing collective yes to another world. Civil rights leader Grace Lee Boggs says it so beautifully here. Growing our economy has been at the expense of the earth and other people. It has been at the expense of our own selves, our own souls. We are damaged. We have the opportunity to transform and become better human beings and develop a safer planet for all living things. I will never forget being at the healthcare town hall in my town after Obama's election and before we formed SURJ. Large numbers of white folks were buying the scare messaging of corporate health giants and the far right and got up and raged that immigrants and those lazy people who did not work were going to get something for free. Indeed, we may have all gotten universal free healthcare, but it went down the toilet in a whoosh of racist fear-mongering. Imagine with me for a moment if instead hundreds and thousands of white people had joined with immigrant people and Black people and demanded free healthcare for everyone. And if we are to organize hundreds of thousands and many more than that, we must create a culture of welcome, something people want to be part of. We cannot create a space of belonging based on holier than thou-ness, endless tensions based on who is the best anti-racist among us, or in spaces where we become an elitist proving ground when around Black and people of color, pushing white folks away instead of understanding that there is humanity here too, that there is power to be built here too. The SURJ values developed with the input of Black and people of color partners help ground us in that and so much more. Among them, calling in, not calling out, taking risks, making mistakes, and keep going. There is enough for all, and centering class. Check them out on our website if you have not. So we are about creating a big ass space for the we of SURJ through lineage, through organizing, shared interest, and belonging. In closing, here are the words from white Southern civil rights leader Ann Braden, who told us, in a sense, the battle is and always has been a battle for the hearts and minds of white people in this country. The fight against racism is our issue. It's not something that we're called on to help people of color with. We need to become involved with it as if our lives depended on it, because really, in truth, they do. And now it's my great honor to pass it to my beloved comrade, Beth.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Carla. It is great to be with all of you tonight. My name is Beth Howard. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman with chin-length blonde curly hair and bright pink lipstick, wearing a black shirt. I am sitting in front of my fireplace. You can see a white mantle behind me. And I am in Lexington, Kentucky. I am the rural Kentucky campaign director for Showing Up for Racial Justice, and I'm excited and hopeful about the work that I'll be helping lead in my beloved state of Kentucky. So I have talked about my story sometimes on these webinars, but I am from rural Eastern Kentucky. I grew up on a tobacco farm, a small family tobacco farm. My family was solidly working class, and we lived in a working class and poor rural white community. My father worked as a strip miner in coal, surface mining, and my mother worked at a grocery store and worked in retail as a clerk, and then later as a factory worker for decades. And I love where I'm from. I love Appalachia. I love my family. We had a lot of joy and laughter, and we also had a lot of struggle. My young life was challenging, and we had a lot of struggle around addiction. We lived paycheck to paycheck. We needed access to healthcare and mental health care. Sometimes we had housing insecurity. And while that's my personal story, that is not a unique story. That experience is shared with people across our state and our region. And all of our stories are connected to the fact that a large amount of us suffer and struggle, and many of us die so that a few can be rich. In 2020, during the uprisings for racial justice, in the wake of the police murder of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, I wrote an appeal to my people, poor and working class white people in Appalachia in the rural South. It was called Rednecks for Black Lives. Maybe some of you read it. It went viral. And so I wanted to start from the point of view of this letter, because I think it says so much about the strategy that we're talking about here tonight and the work that we're going to be building and that we are building in Kentucky. That letter came from the heart. And it was because during the uprisings, I was looking at my social media feed like so many of us were. And I saw, so many people that I loved who are beloved to me from, where I'm from in Appalachia across the state, who were sharing things that were false and that were very hateful about what was going on around police murders of Black people, around the uprisings and the protests. And it was heartbreaking. And, as an organization, we also know that we have to be in action at all times. And, we were watching in real time this powerful moment where we could be called into standing with Black people against police violence, and we could see racism being used to keep us divided. And so we knew we had to get out there and say something. So I stayed up writing, and the thing we kept coming back to, the thing I kept thinking about, was the Battle of Blair Mountain in West Virginia, in the West Virginia mine wars. And so some of you may know that history. If others of you don't, I think they're sharing in the chat a link to the Medium letter that I wrote, and you can read it and read more about the battle. But in short, the Battle of Blair Mountain was in 1921 in West Virginia, and it's the nation's largest labor uprising. and a multiracial, Black, immigrant, poor white people group of 8,000 miners fought coal company operators to unionize. And because working people came together like that, it was so threatening that coal company owners brought 3,000 like newly deputized people and strike breakers to tear them apart, and the police, and ultimately the United States military. And so even though the miners didn't win their union in that particular battle, it laid the groundwork for a much larger labor movement. And it really highlighted the injustice that was happening in the West Virginia coal fields, but also it created power in the multiracial solidarity of poor and working people. And the miners were called rednecks because of the red bandanas that they tied around their neck to indicate that they were union. And so that's a really important piece because the word redneck has been used to degrade us and to, it's been conflated with racism when we look at our actual history, it's actually the opposite. Being called a redneck and wearing a red bandana was actually a sign of multiracial solidarity. And so this letter was a call to our folks to call us back to the fact that we also had to fight police. We also have had to fight rich people who were trying to kill us, coal barons and coal companies specifically in this example, and that the fight against police brutality is also our fight. And so we need to be in solidarity. To me, that letter, it was a call to action, but I really want to emphasize that it was a love letter. It was a love letter to my people. When you're from Appalachia or the South, you often brace yourself when you have to tell people where you're from, because I've experienced in my life so many jokes about poverty, insults about poor people, people using hillbilly and redneck to degrade me and people where I'm from. And, I wanted to say, I wanted to reclaim our history by reclaiming the word redneck. And I wanted to say, I'm a hillbilly, I'm a redneck. I love you. I see you, my people, and you belong in our movements. When we degrade people and write them off, calling them names, making fun of them, blaming them for all the things that are wrong in the country, we push them out of progressive movements and progressive movements and organizing. And so they're either disengaged and disorganized, they're locked in their suffering, and a lot of them get swooped up by the right. And so there's always this pervading thing that I experience too often in our movement, in progressive spaces, where we think that us in the city are going to go out and educate these hillbillies and tell them, what we know that they don't know, they're not smart enough. We have to go and educate them. And, what Rednecks for Black Lives is, and what we're doing in Kentucky and in a lot of our work across the South and across the country, is to say, let's look at our history. Let's look at people across the South and Appalachia who are already rising up in anti-racist movement in solidarity, because I think we have a lot to teach other white people in the country about how to do this. And so it's really about calling ourselves back to who we really are. And, this history is hidden from us because it's dangerous. It's dangerous to those in power. And Blair Mountain is just one example where working people came together across race to stand up against those who want to get rich off of our suffering. And so, in this work, we take inspiration from brilliant Black woman organizer Linda Burnham. And she has said, poor white people are suffering. And if we don't talk to them, someone else will. And they are. And so what we saw on January 6th was the result of long-term, well-funded white supremacist organizing by the right. We cannot let the right have our people and our communities. We cannot sit it out in communities like mine. We cannot keep ceding organizing territory, communities, and people. We have to make our people a better offer than white supremacy. And I believe that better offer is solidarity and it's organizing. As organizers, we always know what a winning strategy is because that's the one that the elite will do everything in their power to destroy. The opposition will do everything in their power to make sure that that kind of multiracial solidarity of working people does not happen because they know if we all come together, then they're outnumbered. And so let's outnumber them. You know, an amazing example of this work that I got to be a part of was when we threw down in Georgia for the 2020 elections, both the general and the runoff elections. You know, we followed the leadership of brilliant Black women organizers who have been building grassroots and electoral power for decades. And we were a member of the statewide electoral table. Everyone at that table, all the organizations there, we each had a specific role to play. And so for SURJ, that meant that we talked to white voters, particularly poor and working class rural voters who are left out of the democratic process. And so just some numbers for you all to kind of make it real. It resulted in 1.8 million calls and 28,236 door knocks that led to 78,000 conversations with voters that secured 21,200 vote commits for Biden and 13,500 vote commits for Ossoff and Warnock. And so in the presidential race, Biden made gains in Georgia in majority white counties. And they, the way they have like done this data, they said in majority white counties among whites without college degrees, they often use education as a stand-in for class. Our collective work increased the voter turnout of the white Democratic voters who were the least likely to vote by 20%. In the runoff election for Senate, rural voters and white voters with less education, so they're saying poor and working class voters, turned out at higher rates for the Democrats than in the presidential election. And so, you know, in that moment, our strategy was to win, but to also build our base by talking with people on a human level to hear about their lives, their hopes, their fears, what they want for their communities. We did not tell them what they should think or approach them as if we knew better. We listened. You know, people ask us how we did it, almost like we might have a magic spell or a new recipe or like the exact mathematics of how to bring poor white people into seeing their shared interest with people of color and to use that shared interest to vote against the right. And, you know, I wish we had one. I have to tell you, there's no secret or like key that we're going to find that will solve all of this for us. Yes, our folks are skilled and brilliant. And I really believe in our strategy and our tools. We have a lot of humility and heart, but it's base building, community organizing that's going to save us, that Black leadership in the South have been doing for decades. And so, you know, a key to all of our work and the best place to start when people ask me what to do, I say, let's listen, let's knock on doors, let's see people's inherent dignity, and let's ask them about things that matter to them and listen. And instead of acting on that impulse to talk and tell them what we think, let's ask another question and listen more. And then we always welcome our folks into our work and we put them in motion. You know, one of my friends who's a labor organizer asked me if my dad came from a labor background or if he was in a union, you know, where did I get my politics? And I said, you know, well, no, because at the time that he was working in the mines, unions were broken up in that part of Eastern Kentucky. I said, but if there had been a union, I know he would have been a part of it. And she said, oh, well, your dad was just unorganized. And that really struck me. It set with me because there are so many people like my dad waiting for somebody to knock on their door. People are waiting to talk with us, and the right can't be the only people knocking on their doors. You know, when the right talks about racism all the time, they're in communities like mine all the time, and we can't be shying away from it because that's leaving our people wide open for the taking. And so I want to say this to you all, and I hope you're with me. They can't have my people anymore. They cannot have our folks anymore. We're going to fight for people in communities like the one where I'm from. We are going to fight for the great state of Kentucky. We deserve better. We deserve the opportunity to get involved in progressive organizing to change our communities. We deserve the opportunity to choose solidarity, to have an opportunity to do meaningful organizing that defeats white supremacy and builds the working class. You know, the work we're doing in Georgia and the work we're building in Kentucky, it's an invitation to poor and working class people to come in and fight for something. You know, we're rebellious people in the South. We're kind of rowdy, and we want to challenge that fighting, that rebelliousness for the right reasons. We want to challenge or channel it for justice. We want to channel our rebelliousness for justice. So I challenge people to see us. People often look at the South and Appalachia as what's wrong with the country. They don't want to invest in us or believe us. I know that we're actually a group of people who are and can be some of the fiercest fighters for racial and economic justice in the country. I'm going to end my time with you by sharing some things that I believe. I believe that collectively, poor and working class people can win. I know we can fight. Let's let them know they can't have our people anymore. Kentuckians, if you're out there, I saw you some introducing yourself coming in. Kentuckians, the right and white supremacists can't have our state. They can't have Appalachia, and they can't have the South, not anymore. I believe the time is always right for us to choose each other, white, Black, and brown. I know that's how we win. And personally, I look forward to helping hand deliver some of those wins from the South. So thank you for letting me be with you this evening. We know we have a winning strategy and that our people will come with us when we engage them. And so next up, I'm going to introduce you to my friends and colleagues and fellow organizers in Ohio who are going to share their work about a groundbreaking ballot initiative. So Emma, join us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Beth, for sharing your power with us. My name is Emma. I use she and her, and I'm calling in from Cleveland, Ohio, where I'm the lead organizer for our SURJ Northeast Ohio chapter. I am a white woman in my late 20s with blonde hair. I'm wearing a SURJ t-shirt, and I'm sitting here at my little desk in my apartment with a blank white background behind me. This past fall, we were trying to do exactly the things that Carla and Beth are talking about. And we can tell you it's not easy, and we can tell you it works. It works. I am really proud to say that on November 2nd, we helped pass a ballot initiative in Cleveland that created one of the very strongest community oversight structures of police in the entire country. So much of the time, our cities just have police policing themselves, but this initiative, known as Issue 24, changes that. Our multiracial coalition was incredible, full of powerful people. And I also just want to say that we are all regular people who decided to take action. In many ways, we are nothing special. What Issue 24 does is it empowers a board of community members, so non-police officers, to actually have the final say in what discipline an officer here receives and in what policy reforms happen in the police department. This is big, and it's just something that we never thought was possible even a couple of years ago. And most importantly, this initiative shifts who has power in our city, giving it back to the community. The campaign was led by 4 main women who I want to speak their names into the room. All of them have family members who were killed by Cleveland police. They were Samaria Rice, mother of Tamir Rice, LaTanya Goldsby, cousin of Tamir Rice, Brenda Bickerstaff, sister of Craig Bickerstaff, and Alicia Kirkman, mother of Angelo Miller. We thank them for their vision and for their leadership. At SURJ, we were really clear that our specific role was to have conversations with white voters and move them to support police accountability and vote yes on issue 24. Our volunteers knocked on 5,000 doors to talk to white people who could have gone either way. But by grounding our conversations in the idea that white people also have a shared interest in police accountability, because we know we do, and by just literally talking to people, literally walking up on their stoop and talking to them, we moved white people on as charged an issue as policing. We were up against a lot, of course. From the very beginning of the campaign, we knew that the police and their allies, which includes almost all of our local politicians, would try to spread fear and misinformation about issue 24. And so we always said that we needed to be the ones to reach white voters first before our opposition did. And unfortunately, we predicted exactly correctly. Especially towards the end of the campaign, local politicians just did a ton of racially charged fear-mongering and just flat out lies about what the initiative would do. The sitting city council president, who is a Democrat, who was running for mayor actually, but lost, his campaign sent out mailers that so clearly were trying to stoke fear among white voters and cause division, and saying that passing police accountability would lead to an increase in crime, that our neighborhoods would become dangerous, and he was invoking these racist stereotypes along the way. It's important to note that our entire city council here in Cleveland is Democrats, but they still repeat talking points of the right. It is not just Republicans who use the messages of the right and messages of racism to advance their agenda. But so to cut through all of this fear mongering that was happening, we kept knocking and we kept knocking and talking to people about it. And we kept knocking and we asked them questions to draw out their experiences and beliefs. That was our strategy. And in many ways, it was simple and it worked, having those one-on-one conversations on a mass scale. And so I want to pass it over to Kevin to share what that actually looked like very concretely.
Thank you, Emma, and good evening to you all. My name is Kevin Baloo. I am a 27-year-old white man in the city of Cleveland. I have slick back hair, a nose ring, and a visible scar on my lip, and a good old pirate flag in the background. So we created an organizing strategy where we specifically focused on door knocking in Cleveland's second whitest ward. And this ward had an 80% white population. And we chose this neighborhood also because it is very working class. And so we know that many people that live there have also been victims of over-policing and incarceration. It's also a neighborhood where more people of color are moving to, because other parts of the West Side are gentrifying and displacing people to this neighborhood. So for right now, it's still affordable. And we know that some politicians might try to come in and stroke some racial tensions for their benefit. So what this door knocking looked and sounded like. It looked like our volunteers meeting up every Sunday for 10 Sundays straight, in the rain, in the sunshine, in the heat, and getting trained on our script and how to go out canvassing. And we'd always go out with a partner, and we'd knock about 40 doors each session. And as you can see, we have some pictures of canvassers. We had a lot of volunteers, and we had hosting locations in the neighborhood. And I just want you to know what it looks like to create these changes, that it's not a big, unattainable goal, but it's one we can accomplish, again, through building on a shared interest with each other. And so what this sounds like is just having these conversations on shared interest and establishing that. And so I'll go through a little bit, about 30 seconds of what our script sounded like when we would knock on somebody's door. So knock on the door, hi, how are you? I'm Kevin Baloo. I'm a volunteer with SURJ, and we're a local community group. How's the night going? And then, once we talk to somebody, then introduce that, we're in the neighborhood talking about police accountability because it's going to be on the ballot this November 2nd. And I have some info I'd like to share with you about issue 24. But first, I'd like to ask what has your experience been like with the Cleveland police? And with this conversation, with opening the door, with an open-ended question about their experience, we had a lot of engagement with people. And like I said, it didn't always, people weren't always on board with us, right? We had to build this relationship, and whether that takes one time knocking on their door, 6 times or 10 times, we started the conversation. And there was one particular story that will always stay with me that was so impactful, because it was a guy outside and the whole family was outside, and this man, he was maybe in his late 20s, white man, and he was an adamant Trump supporter. He was very vocal about his belief that they stole the vote, right? And his mistrust in the system, his mistrust in the government. And it wasn't until I spoke to him about issue 24 and police accountability and asked him his experience that we started to get some common ground. And he expressed to me that he has distrust in the Cleveland police, and he's been incarcerated before. And by the end of the conversation, he was in support of issue 24. And it was just a beautiful way to break down the politics versus the policy, right? And so that's how, these conversations can build community together. But that being said, we still have work to do. We know we still have work to do. It's not just a one and done situation. We want to build communities up and organize in these communities and build other organizers in these communities. We know that moving people to stop aligning with, supremacist policies is going to take more than just one conversation. But nonetheless, we're going to be out there this spring and summer and fall time to keep engaging people and talking to them about policing, and to keep people moving to join our fight for racial and economic justice. Thank you.
Hey, how's it going? My name's TJ, he, him pronouns. I'm coming to you from Virginia Beach, originally Powhatan. Lush. I have a hat on with some very thick headphones. And then some artwork behind me. All right. I'm not sure if we're getting any technical difficulties, but I'm just gonna roll with it. All right.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right. So I was born to 2 deaf parents of
TJ, it froze a little. Maybe if you turn your camera off, the audio will come in better.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
hopefully.
that's great. Thank you. Mhm.
All right, born to disabled parents, working class, paycheck to paycheck, up north in Virginia. A little bit more about me before I get into the exact story is I went into the military a little bit after high school. I did 13 years. I was with the 3rd Ranger Battalion for a majority of that time. 8 combat tours. I had 4 to Iraq, 3 to Afghanistan, and 1 to another location. I did all kinds of leadership schools, you know, in the name of being a patriot and whatnot. So when I was a kid, you know, little TJ had this feeling of what he was supposed to be. He was supposed to be a man. He was supposed to be fearless, emotionless. I knew that I was a white male and I had this stereotype above me of what my abilities were. I knew that I was disposable, and I knew that I had to be the one to put my life on the line in order to be called a man. What little TJ wanted to be, you know, he wanted to be a difference. You know, he wanted to be a part of something. He wanted to belong. He wanted to be with a group of people that were like himself, a group of people that were going to do something that was bigger and better for humanity, mankind in the long run. You know, so with me being a little kid, by the age of 12, I had the experience of 2 different cultures, the deaf culture and then the white male cisgendered culture. I also had experience of 2 different classes. My parents' family was extremely wealthy, but yet my parents working paycheck to paycheck. And that always confused me and made me a little bit jealous of my cousins and whatnot. And then I had too many experiences, you know, before I hit the military. My parents were divorced by I was age 10. It was a rough divorce. They threw us right into the middle of it. I was sexually assaulted by another male before age 10. And then by the time I hit 18, I spent a little time in county jail, about 6 months, for committing 2 felonies. So little TJ grew up really quick, joined the military after the jail time, and then succeeded to fill in the shoes of what I thought I was supposed to be, of what I thought a man was supposed to be. So I did these combat tours and I committed murders in the name of a nation. And I committed these murders feeling that I was doing the right thing, but something inside of me deeply disagreed with the outside voices. I was stuck in a spot where everybody thought the same thing. And if I was to speak out differently, then I was going to be the weak link, typical in a very, you know, type A masculine environment. So I stuffed it way down. I committed my crimes and I continued to bury that pain deep, deep, deep down inside. So what I was challenged to be was what little TJ didn't want to be. And unfortunately, he didn't realize that until he ended up in the hospital with post-traumatic stress disorder, nightmare disorder, all kinds of stuff in the name of our nation. So all of these experiences in my life have brought this realization of pain. And that pain that I can see, share, and identify in other people. I can see them being angry because no one is trying to talk to them, because they feel like they're left out, because they feel like that no one cares about them. Because I feel that within myself. So what changed me? It's that pain. That pain is what changed me. When I saw pain in another human life form's eyes as they took their last breath, when I saw the pain in families as I destroyed their homes, I also see that pain now as a 37-year-old man being back here in the United States. And I see it across the board within races, and I also see it within white men. I'm gonna skate a thin line here because white men are the least of our worries, right? White men are the ones that they got it all going on. So a lot of white men are going to feel like they just have to sit out and sit on the sidelines. All right. I know that sounds terrible, but it's real. There's a lot of white men out there that are looking for what do I do? And you know who's contacting those white men? The same people that would have contacted me if I had made 3 to 4 different choices in my life differently. The same ones that would said, hey, come join my group, come join my militia, come join the Oath Keepers, 3%ers, come join the Proud Boys. We got your back. It's the same thing of what you experienced before. They'll grab me. And you know why? Because those individuals didn't have the separate experiences that I had that made me realize what I was doing was wrong. Those individuals didn't have someone who came up to them and put their hand on their shoulder and said, hey, man, hey, what you're doing is not right. That's not right. And you know that. They're not having those one-on-one deep conversations with these people because they're deplorable. I'm going to be real with you. I see myself on all of the insurrectionists on January 6th. I see the pain in their face, the angry screams of wearing a stupid buffalo hat, of all those folks that are running. I see deep past that silly facade that they have on, and they are hurting inside. Now, I don't want to glorify what they did, but what I want to do is try to prevent anyone else that's not being spoken to by someone besides a person who is perpetuating hate. So I do see myself in those folks that stormed the Capitol. I think that I would have been there. And you know what? I would have wanted somebody to tell me, like, hey, you're doing the wrong thing. And you know what I would have said? I would have said, fuck you. I'm doing the right thing. America forever. I'm a goddamn patriot. This is what I need to do. This is who I am. I want somebody to come back a second time. Hey, what you're doing is not right. I want them to come back again and again and again and again until they get me to realize what I'm doing is wrong, and they get me to join into this mindset of correct what's right by not fighting who's on my left, who's on my right, by fighting who is above us. Wealthy, bureaucratic pieces of shit. All right. I am going to pass it to Scott. I was going to talk a little bit about Punch Up. I appreciate your time.
TJ, I love you. I just love you. My name's Scott Davis, he, him, and I'm a white middle-aged man with a salt and pepper goatee sitting in front of an old adobe wall. And I'm in Tewa country, which is New Mexico on your maps, northern New Mexico. I'm a Mason by trade, and I want to clarify, no secret handshakes. It's all about the brick and mortar. Now I do project management for a native community up here in northern New Mexico. And I just want to talk to you for a minute. I mean, being a white man in this work, one of the things that I'm seeing around, and that TJ was just speaking to too, is, you know, we've all got struggles. We all got some kind of pain. We all got something going on in our lives that ain't just straight up. And yes, I do have privilege, and my privilege does influence my experience in my life, but it has never been enough to pay my rent. Not once. I have more in common with Black, Latino, and Native bus drivers and plumbers than I do with white senators and CEOs. I know that I'm never going to get shot because of the color of my skin, but I also know that my whiteness doesn't make me bulletproof. And when Black Lives Matter is more than a slogan and it becomes a reality of this nation, then I too will be safe from police violence. And all the while, neither party is telling us the truth. The Reds are blaming the immigrants and the Blues are blaming the Reds. And at the same time, Bezos is orbiting the planet in a private rocket. He went so far as to thank us for the opportunity. And I'm not talking about how many times that I ordered toilet paper on Amazon. That's not what put him into space. No, it's a society that allows one man to extract so much labor from the rest of us that he can joyride around the planet like that. It is time for us to stop punching sideways, stop punching each other, and start punching up. And so we have an invitation to all of you here. Sign up for Punch Up. It's a new initiative we got going. We're especially reaching out to white men, working class white men, poor white men who have experienced incarceration. Please, the link will be put in the chat. Sign up for our mailing list and take our survey. I love you all. And back to Julia.
Woo! I don't know about y'all, but that was a lot of fire. Really deep gratitude to TJ, Scott, Emma, Kevin, Beth, Carla. Y'all brought so much experience, so much organizing, so much analysis, and just so much passion and love. And yeah, really grateful for the brilliance that you brought, and really appreciative of what we are doing. So I don't know about y'all, but maybe throw some love in the chat. Feel super lucky to have gotten to learn from you. And I'm sure people want to know how to get involved. We've seen some questions and really great discussion in the Q&A section. So I'm going to throw out a few things, namely join SURJ and join Punch Up. If you're masculine identifying and want to join Punch Up, that's a really obviously important and brilliant space to be in and to learn. And then SURJ has a number of opportunities. You can see on the slide that we have different ways for you to get involved. So one way is that we're trying to organize white people away from white supremacy with a group called the United Vision Project. So through that, we're basically texting hundreds of thousands of white people who live in areas that we think are vulnerable to right-wing recruitment so that we can interrupt that. So we really would love for you to join us in that texting project. It's a lot of folks we're trying to reach out to. It's a great way for us to learn about how they're doing it and to also counter the narrative that they're doing. We're seeing all levels of government across the country backsliding towards authoritarianism. And we know that there are obviously really dire consequences if we don't act. As TJ said, like, we need to be out there, we need to be talking to people, and we need to be going back again and again and again and recruiting folks into something different, into something better, and into a movement where we can change and improve everybody's lives. At SURJ, we know the solution to racist violence is not to distance ourselves from other white people or to absolve ourselves, to kind of wipe our hands and act like we're better than anybody, but to organize our own people. White people have been organized into these beliefs, and we know that at least some of them, a lot of them, can be organized away from them towards a racially just future. So this United Visions project is bringing people together across the country to do text-based canvassing, to listen and learn more about how white communities are being recruited into white nationalist organizations and beliefs. And then we're going to use what we learned from that to organize interventions that are going to block the right, and we're going to counter-organize in those communities this year and beyond this year. So there's two orientation and trainings coming up if you want to get involved in that. January 26th is the first launch meeting, so you can connect with other SURJ members at that meeting. And learn more about the project. We're going to ground ourselves in the political moment, think a little bit about the history of this work, and learn more about what we can do. And then also on February 15th, we'll get trained in the conversation model that we'll be using to go out and talk to folks using text to reach people across the country. So that is one really important opportunity, learn about and get involved. Another is if you want to join the Abolition Action Hour, we're going to do collective education and training in how to take action together for frontline racial justice campaigns, especially related to abolishing and defunding police and prisons. So for those ones, all you need is a computer and a phone. They're really fun. You get on and you make phone calls and work with other people. So they're every third Thursday of the month. The next one that we have coming up is a week from today. It's on the 20th at noon Pacific, 3 o'clock Eastern. And then we also want to have more people join as members. So Beth was talking about coming to Kentucky. We have work in Georgia. We have a bunch of work across the country in the South. And if you join as a member, you can learn about different ways you can take action and fight the right nationally in your own community, in a local chapter, start your own chapter. So sign up on the link that we're going to put in the chat now to come to a member orientation and hear more about the history of SURJ, some of the stuff that Carla started talking about, the work that we're doing, and how to get more involved as a member. So those are the second Thursdays, and our next one we have is on February 10th. Just deep gratitude to everyone for coming tonight. So much gratitude to the speakers and especially for the organizing. Y'all are doing incredibly brave. This is really hard and very necessary work. Thank you for joining. Y'all have a good night. Appreciate you. Take care.